So all the international bodies that came up after the Second World War, these are basically unipolar dollar-led bodies. And this word you will never find about unipolar dollar-led trade deals or unipolar dollar-led regulations, unipolar dollar-led human rights. Right? This is exactly what has happened after the Second World War, and all these is hidden under the carpet under the name of globalization. Now, there has never been a true and fair globalization, so to speak. What has happened, what the world has seen in the last 100, 150 years, is unipolar dollar led international trade. It was never globalization. If there had to be some free and fair globalization, it should be free movement of all the four factors of production to and fro. Has it ever happened? No. Right? So when they talk about rules based international order, when these bodies talk about, they are talking about the Western templates of regulations. They are never talking about taking the entire rest of the world along. And what is this? These are the international communities, so to speak: US, UK, Canada, Australia, right? And some countries in the Europe. So the world is realizing this, and as you see that the United Nations Security Council has still not reformed after talks for 30 years, and India has still not been given its due position with the veto power over there. So I think that's the end of the international bodies in terms of influence. I mean, these bodies are now going to be reduced into what I would call in India as a chai pani nashta table kind of a thing, because the other bodies are going to take over all the influential role and task of these bodies, because these bodies failed to reform, failed to read what Asia and Gulf are has undergone in the last 10 to 20 years. Exactly what I said. The rest of the world is trying to bring out US and UK from the 18th century to this century, and US and UK are just dragging their feet, still delusioned of their of the big chunk of role which they played back then. That cannot happen again. I mean, they have to wake up that this is 21st century. You cannot drag your feet in 18th century and believe that that kind of influence is going to continue moving forward. It cannot. So this particular question is very interesting, Aditya ji, because it has a macroeconomic background in all the nations. When you say the rural untouched America and the urban America, similarly we have rural untouched Bharat and the urbanized India. So all the countries have this two parallels which are moving around, and one of the common theme among the urban sections of all the countries is the US dollar. That's the common minimum denomination, which is, in general with all the urbanized section of all the countries in the world. And I'll tell you the exact reason for this. The United States dollar, in its, this fiat currency model, where, it is not pegged to any real production and manufacturing or commodities, what that exactly means is that you gave birth to a service sector. Because of this fiat currency model, you created some unrequired jobs which probably do not add so much real value to the lives of the people, but you created a balloon of glorifying those jobs and the massive pay scales that those jobs carry. And you not just did that in America, you actually exported that idea to the world. And in most countries, if you take the example of the Indian IT sector, now a lot of outsourcing work which comes from the West to the Indians over here, these are the, I would say, for a lack of good word, a kind of dog biscuits which are thrown on the countries to keep the US dollar going. Because the four items which are oppressed in this world are manufacturing, farming, real production and commodities, gold and silver. These are the 4 5 items which are artificially oppressed to keep the fiat currency model of the US dollar surviving for the last 50 years. So it is but natural that the rural, untouched America does not want wars. The rural Bharat relies on farming and actual production and actual commodities. The urbanized India is attracted to the Western urbanized American lifestyle, wherein the morals fall from the usual family unit traditional values which we call about. So I think de-dollarization will wipe out a lot many of unrequired service sector jobs, and will bring down them to the real value that they are. And it has a lot to do with what America does with its military. I mean, is it going to cut the defense budget once the US dollar gets repegged to some real commodity like gold or silver? So a lot of things are connected over here, as you see, countries to countries. So most of these expenditures which are directed towards foreign nations have a lot to do with what I call as preserving this reserve currency status. Now, one thing we need to understand, that when the bilateral transactions between countries shift to outside dollar invoicing and referencing, what that means is that the demand for the dollar is going to go down over the years gradually. So what is going to happen with all the funding that the United States trying to do in several nations worldwide? It is somehow looks like a kind of an escapism where they are going to throw dollars on this nation so that they are going to use it somewhere. It's kind of the last attempt at surviving some relevance of US dollar in the foreign trade, where these small, very small nations would be tempted to continue using the US dollar despite some major parts of the world moving towards de-dollarization. So it will not be a surprise if billions of dollars go into Africa, or some small nations, billions of dollars go outside, whereas there are homeless in America itself. I mean, it's just ironical that the US government does not care about there are a lot of issues to be addressed at home. And the funding is going somewhere outside, because the Americans do not realize that keeping this hegemony, or some relevance in the geopolitics, is very much important for the American lifestyle, which is currently ongoing. So these questions are natural, that why the money is going outside. Well, it indirectly helps keeping the lifestyle which is going on.
You're
So, Africa as a continent will be the new battlefield for all the players in the world, all the big players in the world, especially when you see that the Gulf and Asia wants to move towards a currency which is a pegged currency. The African leaders are very strong. The people are ready to fight whatever the military onslaught it comes upon. But I believe that it's going to be a new battlefield in terms of not just trade and investments, but because of its massive natural resources as well. Because if you are going to have a currency in the world which is going to be a pegged currency to commodities and real production, what it means that the mining industry could be highly regulated moving forward, and even nationalized in some countries, which means that Africa, which is a big treasure in terms of mining resources, definitely the eyes of all the global powers will be on how to tap those resources. So Africa will be the new battlefield, and also some of the African nations who want to come out of the colonial oppression which they have faced. And you rightly pointed out, there's so many indirect French colonies, so to speak, with the direct and indirect influence of the French government. Similarly, there are colonies of US and UK as well, indirectly, in terms of, I mean, if I'm just to give you an example of how you make moves to make a country a colony kind of a thing. Assume there's a poor country which has a problem with the water resources. What do the so-called international community of nations, the West, which you talked about, US, UK, Europe, Canada, Australia, what do they do to help such a poor nation? They would sponsor supply of water bottles, right? That is what they would do, which means that next year again, that poor nation would be requiring the same help, which means an onslaught of policy terms and conditions, which is defined by the West for in exchange of that water supply every year. Right now, we just compare that with what India would do. India would help them build dams, right? So that next year they do not have to come again for asking things. So you see, when this kind of nations, they are going to make uh, huge amount of exploitation with these African countries, and African countries will have to take some stand when it comes to picking who their partners would be, partners in development would be. So Russia, China, India, United States, that they have many options now. Where the world goes in terms of the African world moves. I mean, South Africa is definitely a part of BRICS, a major part of BRICS organization. So, and they are keen to move towards moving out of the US dollar hegemony. Even small countries, Zimbabwe, Ghana, moving towards gold and silver kind of commodities to trade their major transactions. So new things happening, and we are watching United States military with a lot of surprise as to how they move about these new changes which are coming next year.